It's go- How's it going, everyone? Before here, welcome to Heliopolis Radio. We've been fortunate enough to be joined by Noah Healy. He is the founder of Coordinated Discovery, and essentially they've designed a new system, which is entitled CDM. I'm not going to actually go into the exact details for it. I'll leave it to Noah. He's better equipped to tell you about it. But essentially, what it's meant to do is shift the traditional commodities exchange market that we have now. It's actually a whole new way of kind of handling it. It eliminates a lot of the overhead costs. And I'll hand it over to you, Noah. May you introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your educational background and kind of what brought you to designing CDM and essentially how it works. Give it over to you.
Thanks. So my name is Noah Healy. Educationally, I've been studying math basically since I found out that it existed. I also like reading a lot, so I do a fair bit of that. And when I got out of school in the year 2000 and needed a job, jobs were plentiful in the tech industry, but they weren't particularly stable. So I wound up bouncing back and forth between a bunch of tech startups. I live in a small town, but it's a college town, so there are places with much better opportunities, but this is home. And as a result of bouncing around to these places and studying math of computers, I got myself into a position where I had some savings and I wanted to take some time to think about new kinds of computational algorithms, things around communication and consensus. It was an interesting problem to me with networks. It's sort of easy if you're face to face with somebody to come to common ground. But if you have scattered entities, which might include sensors or robots or people that are on the other side of the planet that are filtered through various kinds of networks, it gets much harder to reach the common understanding of what all of your pictures of reality look like. And so I thought that'd be an interesting thing to think about, basically. And that's where CDM comes from. I found an approach using game theory. Game theory is sort of the mathematics of strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And what you can do is effectively create a system, a program that will give its users a positive incentive to share information that is common among themselves. So it's not that you're giving away your secrets so much, it's that you're learning what you have in common. So this might apply to sensor arrays across a country for meteorology. It might apply to the internal state of a project in a large company, but it also applies to marketplaces where you have a lot of producers that are scattered across, these days, potentially the entire planet, and consumers that might potentially also be scattered across the entire planet. They're certainly geographically diverse in both cases for virtually everything. And they need to come to a common understanding of how valuable this stuff is, so how hard they should be working to make it, and what they should pay to get people to do that hard work on their behalf so that they have the supplies they're looking for.
100%. And I just wanted to ask, obviously, the commodities market is kind of well established. And so prior to designing CDM, did you have any experience in trading commodities, or was it just more, it just came out as like, look, this system works very well in various different spheres, maybe let's just apply it to the commodities market? I'm just kind of wondering how the implementation happened.
Much more the second one. I have zero experience trading commodities, other than my penchant for buying, bulk commodities for food. So I can bake and cook, and so I buy bags of flour and sugar and stuff rather than the prepped stuff at the grocery store. But I had a little family history. My grandfather was a lobbyist with the Dairy Council, which is the milk industry here in the United States. Their industry association. So I had heard stories from him about getting milk into a commodity place from his career as a child. And my stepmother's brother was a commodity trader in Chicago. So the one time we went out and visited her family, I can recall we had a little day trip and went out and like sat in the gallery and watched the people shout at each other. So like I know that the commodity markets exist, and I know family members that use them. I have other family that own farms and use these markets. But what I had learned in school in basic economics, the existing market design is seen as essentially miraculous. We don't know who invented it. It's generally accepted that it was an accident. That just the combination of Italian culture and coffee and chalkboards in the early Renaissance just happened to turn into the kinds of markets that we use today, and that technological tune-ups here and there aside, it's basically exactly the same as it was 7 centuries ago. But I had learned this. I had internalized this in a handful of econ classes, and so when I came up with this approach, I sort of had this intuitive thing of how I could create a marketplace, and I thought it would be really cool if I took this approach, built a marketplace with it, and could demonstrate that it worked as well as this thing that everybody knows is perfect. Because, if you can do something as well as something else that's perfect in a different way, then that's a very strong argument for the approach in general. It turned out that there's a hidden assumption in that belief about the perfection of existing marketplaces, that the cost of the marketplace has to be linked to the rewards of the marketplace. And so my approach allows me to change that fact. So you can lower those costs while simultaneously increasing the rate of return for good information. And so that's why this system is superior to the system we presently have.
And so in terms of I've taken a few econ classes. I didn't do too well in them, but from what I did get the gist, in essence, you have supply and demand, and those kind of determine the price. I did understand from what I researched on CDM that there's a predetermined price that is established. And so how does this incentivize sellers? Because we all know that our primary motive when we do something, we're always going to want to sell it at a higher price. There's always has to be a profit incentive. And so if everyone who's selling the same type of commodity, they're going to get the same price across it. I just don't know, how do you feel that would incentivize them to participate in CDM? So I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, sure. So there's 2 key things to understand. The first one is that CDM, while every trade happens at a pre-published price, the price itself isn't static. So what CDM is doing is, rather than negotiating individual deals, which is how the existing market operates, what it's doing is attempting to negotiate all future deals. So it simultaneously sets prices not just for tomorrow or next week, but for every day of every year for decades. The computers are very good at storing and displaying numbers. And so if you think about one price per day, that's 365 numbers. That's a pittance in computer memory and storage space. So a decade of numbers, that's 3,652 or 3, depending on where your breaks are on the leap years. It takes a very small memory footprint to keep track of that much information. And so each of those days is being independently negotiated in an attempt to find the price for that day that will make that day as profitable as possible. And that gets us to the second thing, which is, while you would obviously rather sell for more if you could, what is making you money is your ability to produce however much you're producing profitably.
Yes.
So if there isn't demand, then you don't get to trade at all, and then you'd have a catastrophic loss. So the job of the marketplace is to balance that supply and that demand so that there are buyers for the things that you're selling. And so while one seller might say, well, what if I sold it for more? Well, he might not be able to find any buyers then if everybody else is selling for the right price. That is symmetric then with the buyers, who would obviously much rather pay less for the same goods if they could get away with it. But in an environment where the sellers all know what this price is, nobody's going to sort of break ranks to give less money into their own pockets. So that balancing act still exists. It's all about supply and demand. The hard part is, how do you find the information to find where that point is? And the key thing that I worked out is that right now is obviously the most important time that there is, but since price isn't static, and since the goal is some kind of stable structure, we can't stabilize the price right now. This is the failure of command economies. This is the failure of, CEOs that think that they know better than the world does. But we can stabilize our understanding of how things will evolve over time. And so that can allow everybody to plan in accordance with how everybody else is planning, all at the same time, and get to this situation where people are running their businesses to make the stuff that people need, knowing that that need is there and where the prices are being negotiated. And at the same time, people can run their businesses that need things and can know that that need is being offered, that there's incentives out there to get people to produce that stuff for them.
So I was going to ask, because it's interesting now. I think the one thing that is just really volatile about commodities is so reflective of the state of global affairs. And so I was wondering, how would this model respond to geopolitical events as well as natural disasters? Because I understand that when you're developing a price model, obviously you have historical price data that's been pulled from years before that people can use to project forward. But now, when you take into account the state of things now, which are quite different than before, how then does this system accommodate the anomalies, which are increasingly more common today than ever before? How will it survive that type of volatility?
Right. Well, so again, there's a couple of different angles to this at the geopolitical events, and I'll get to natural disasters afterwards. So, in the one hand, the existing markets actually incentivize the creation of counterparty ignorance. So, in the existing market, you don't make money because you're very good at producing things at lower cost than anybody else, or you can buy things and get much greater value out of them. You make money because your counterparty is willing to accept a deal that's worse than people in general should be accepting. And so having conditions be such that there are lots and lots of counterparties that just don't have a clue what's going on and are willing to take very bad deals is a benefit to the people who are trading in these marketplaces. And so the markets are actually incentivizing human society craziness because the crazier our societies are, the more the markets can charge for what they're doing. This system flips that exactly on its head. It's creating a system where people knowing what's happening is what causes the market to make the most money. And so that incentive flips over with it. And the second part is that information can come from anywhere. So sure, maybe the cheese producers in your country and the cheese factories in your country don't have a handle on what's going on in the government offices, but the people in the government offices have handles on those things, and they can also go in and speculate on these systems and make money by smoothing out those rough edges and letting people know what the future is going to look like. And so geopolitical events and other human-centered surprises, if you will, offer everyone that's actually a party to that surprise the opportunity to let the cat out of the bag early for enormous personal gain. So just at the same time that right now creating policy or a political movement that destabilizes social order gives you an incentive, creates opportunities in trading markets, and this would reverse that. So creating policies that normalize social order now improve your systems. At the same time, every single individual that's aware of anything that might have regional or even global impact can now get paid more or less the most that it's possible to be paid by letting everybody know best they can how that's going to impact the day-to-day of everyone that's involved. So that kind of scenario really gets us through those things in a much better way than we're doing right now. Now, the natural disaster, that's another kind of problem. Some natural disasters are the sorts of things that there are some experts that might have some insights. And for that, the fact that information can come from everywhere is going to help out a lot. Some natural disasters are really going to come out of absolutely nowhere. And the thing to understand is that no marketplace can actually solve for that in the future. The world's just unpredictable. When the COVID lockdowns happened, oil prices in America went negative for a while. That's insane. Like if you had told somebody in the 90s that the oil prices in America would be a negative number, they would commit you. Like that's just not something that can happen. So the problem then becomes, how does your market recover from situations where things become deranged? And the way CDM recovers from derangements in supply and demand is that the CDM program essentially monitors how much use it's getting. And so when you've got a bad day or even a bad week because of something, then the total trade volume will dip precipitously as people have, other problems. You can't drive to market if the bridge is washed out, that kind of thing. And so what happens is that the CDM becomes much, much less expensive to actually negotiate and forecast. So the mistakes that were made in good faith become inexpensive to repair as a direct result of the result of how people behave once the mistakes were made. So then those people get a windfall as the market rebounds, as you come up with new prices that allow people to actually trade profitably again. Then the people that were able to put in those cheap values will now get a sort of multiple on their return rates because the market's gotten bigger again. It's not valuable to derange a market intentionally so that you can ride it back up again. The total value of the marketplace does dip for destabilizing it. So if you're some Machiavellian, like supervillain type character, you're still losing money making that kind of roller
that
coaster happen. But if there's a tidal wave or an earthquake or a volcano or a pandemic or something else that just comes out of nowhere, then sure, this makes it as inexpensive as possible to get back on track as quickly as we can.
And so you mentioned eliminating overhead costs between, you don't need as many parties to get what do you need from your supplier to the buyer. And so I'm just wondering, what system will be in place to make sure that process is smooth? So for instance, I'm going to buy wheat from somebody. What systems in place are going to ensure that wheat is delivered to me, in its exact, in the perfect condition possible? Is there a third party that you're going to use, or how is that transaction going to occur in the case of physical trade?
So, So this technology is a price discovery technology for a marketplace. Price discovery is the most important part of marketplace, but regulatory compliance, agreement compliance, and so on are other aspects of marketplaces, and they do a pretty decent job right now of doing that. So I'm licensing this technology to people who either have a marketplace and would have those things in place, or people who wish to build one and therefore need to build those sorts of contractual systems that will allow that kind of thing to happen. At the sort of high level of globalized commodities or even continent scale commodities, in many cases you can't, delivery isn't really delivery. It's the possession of property assigned to you in a bonded warehouse that's on the transport network. And so it would be possible within a CDM to have what amounts to bilateral collateral. So people wouldn't be able to offer things for sale unless they were known to be of the appropriate quality and sitting inside a warehouse from which delivery could be taken. And the escrow could be assigned to the operator of the marketplace in order to allow the sale to occur. And at the same time, in order to offer to make a buy, you would actually have to have the cash or appropriate credit in hand to be able to make payment, which again could be escrowed with the CDM. So when the CDM batches up all the supply and all the demand for the day or the afternoon or the week or whatever the pace of the trade is, all that stuff would essentially already exist. So they could execute the contracts and just tell the buyers, hey, here's your wheat. It's in warehouse 771A. Get it out of here before we have to start charging you for it. And they could then tell the sellers, the cash is in your bank account, go nuts. So that kind of system is perfectly plausible.
And so now just so that people may have a clear indication of could you maybe define the role of the producer, the consumer, and the forecaster, how they are integrated into the system? I know that there's a compensation plan for forecasters for accurate price prediction, and then there's a negative compensation, or there's a penalty for poor price prediction, which is, I feel it's very, 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 very genius in the sense that now the accuracy and the authenticity of information will be way, way, way higher. But just maybe what the producers and consumers can also hope to actually, what they will be doing within the system.
Right, sure. So producers are essentially sellers within the system. They're people that have whatever the good or service is that's being negotiated for. And so what they do within the system is they take a look at what the price on offer is. They take a look at the projections for where prices are headed. And they make a decision about their own business, how they should trade through the system. And so what they do on any given day is essentially declare how much of their stock they would like to sell at the deals that are on offer. And those those offers by the producers will be aggregated together to be matched off against consumers that are doing the same thing, except on the other side, looking again at the deals that exist, where deals are going, and making a decision based on the economics of their individual business, what looks like it's going to make them the most money, and making the offer to buy and saying how much they would like to take, and sort of committing to that. Now, the trick is that producers and consumers are just people. And so just like everybody else, they can also decide to take their information to the negotiation marketplace and play a role in forecasting and negotiating where those prices are heading. But those are two separate activities.
Yeah.
Just because you say that the market's going to go to $10 a bushel doesn't mean that suddenly you're going to be selling at $10 a bushel. It just means that your information is getting integrated with everybody else's to figure out where prices are actually going to head. And wherever they wind up, that price will be available to you just as it is to everybody else. So that's where this negotiator, forecaster, there's not a great name for this yet, role exists, where people who think they know where the future's headed tell the marketplace about it, and then they put up investment capital to get the market to move in their direction. And so what the market's doing is measuring how much your ideas would move it around and assigning a number, right, like the number in cash, to how much it should cost to make that move happen. And with lots and lots of people, dozens at least, of opinions coming in, that will push prices towards the median expectation of everybody. And the cool thing about a supply and demand system is that the median's the right answer. So the median is the number at a distribution that's in the middle of all the other numbers. And if you think about every single trade, there's a single thing that will be sold for the least amount of money. There's a single thing that can be bought for the most amount of money.
Yeah.
And then there's a second thing that can be for the second least and second most, and so on. Yeah. All the way down to, finally, the last deal that can actually happen. The one that's sold for the most and bought for the least. Those are the last deals that can actually happen. So the middle point of all the deals that can actually happen is also the point that maximizes the value of all the deals across everything. And so that's what the system tends towards, and that's what this sort of pushing the ball back and forth will land on for each day into the future.
And so
then, well, sorry.
No problem. You can finish, sir. You can finish, yes. Apologies for that.
To get to the reward side of it, the money that you pay stays in escrow with the system. And the deals that happen, the commissions, some of that money gets put onto the pile too. And then we look at how much of your market price push was still around by the time the deal got made. And we pay you back from the pool of the money you invested plus the rewards that the entire market accrued based on how accurate it turned out to be.
No, wow. I have a lot of extensive questions because this is it's a complex topic, but I did want to add on, because we have 9 minutes left. You mentioned machine learning, so I wanted to ask, does the system have its own price prediction mechanism based on positive and negative price predictions that are put in by forecasters? And on top of that, yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay, yeah. So yes, it does. What this is effectively a machine learning model that human beings can integrate into. So what this is doing is it's evaluating all the strategies for price discovery that everybody that has a strategy wants to put forth. So whether that's some new kind of AI that people have developed, whether that's decades of experience, whether that's just somebody that thinks they're talking to God, it doesn't matter. This system will evaluate each of those ideas, pull them all together, and reward them based on how effective they are. And so what that creates over sort of an evolutionary pattern of after several cycles of this is that it's pursuing the strategy which is the best of every strategy that anybody can come up with. So if you come up with a brand new strategy that has something to offer, this will extract the valuable part of what you have to offer and integrate that into itself. So this essentially becomes a super intelligence. It's as smart as all of the smartest ideas that everybody has.
And is there some type of filter or process of filtration that will happen? So when someone suggests a price prediction, will it either reject or accept based on previous information received, or to continuously take regardless? So there'll be no discrimination that happens in that process?
No, all action is based on human incentive. So if you have some crazy idea and you have enough money to back it up, then the system will take it on board. And if it's the result of your crazy idea, the producers and consumers aren't really that happy anymore, then you're going to lose most of that money. And in many jurisdictions, also expose yourself to criminal charges for having intentionally deranged the marketplace. So everything is based on, at the end of the day, how human beings feel about their own situation. If you're a producer and you don't like the prices that are coming out of the marketplace, hire salesmen. Get your own customer list. Try to negotiate your own prices. If you can make that work, more power to you. You're not really going to be able to make it work because people aren't going to buy commodity product for more money than the market's offering it for. But give it a try. See what happens. Same thing. If you want to buy apples for less than they're selling them in the store, well, if you can find some sucker that'll sell them to you, good for you. But you're going to find that that's not a great business model. And if that guy who's talking to God is, then everybody gets to find out what the prices tomorrow are going to be. A lot cheaper than we ever did before. But in the very likely event that he needs to be committed, he's not going to do very well, and eventually his family's going to take the bank account away from him. So, that's how it works. We measure everything against what people need, based on their own beliefs about their own situations.
And so, I actually had a few more questions, but I'll go with the last three. The first one being, obviously, we understand that cybersecurity is the main fear and concern that most people go into. So maybe without going into too much detail, what type of systems will be in place just to make sure that the market is preserved and protected from any type of malicious attacks of that nature? And also, how is this going to every country has its own legislation. So how is this going to help for transnational trade and things like that? Because maybe one country may adopt, but because of a political regime in another country, they won't accept it. You know how it works. And I think we'll go with those two.
Okay. Well, cybersecurity, again, there are pretty well accepted techniques and the cryptography involved in, say, identifying yourself to your bank or using cell phone money are not only well understood, but also being continuously researched and upgraded. So this can effectively, whoever's operating one of these markets absolutely should be building that sort of monetary security into their systems and maintaining that. One advantage of this over existing markets is because the actual footprint of the computers and data is so much smaller, it's an easier task to actually secure it. Because there's just fewer computers and less data that you have to keep track of. Secondarily, in terms of country adoption, the real hard part is where I am right now, where there's a handful of people scattered around the planet trying to set up brand new marketplaces. Setting up brand new marketplaces is an expensive proposition. And so that's why I'm in the licensing business and not the building marketplaces business. But at the end of the day, there's a reason there's only one market model we use across the entire world. And it's not because they conquered the planet. Actually, it's because the people that used those markets were always at the forefront of the economy. So the Northern Italians had it, and then they lost it to the Dutch because after the Spanish started pulling silver out of the New World, it turned out that the deep water port that they used was Amsterdam and Antwerp and those sorts of areas. And so they had the cheapest money on the planet. They took over the markets. They became the financial center of Europe. Britain took over from them by inventing the fractional reserve bank, and nobody's come up with less expensive money than fiat currency since then. So that's why that system works like that. But it works like that because it is the most effective forum that has been known to find prices. That's what people actually need. So as CDMs finally get off the ground and start spreading, what governments are going to find is that they're going to have a choice between adopting CDM and having an economy, or denying CDM and not having an economy. And so there definitely could be some governments that decide that they don't want to have economies, but they will not last long, which would be cold comfort for people that live in those places.
All right, no, I mean, we have less than 2 minutes left. So last question, is there a means of people to contact you? And also maybe, I know you have your website where people can go in and understand how the licensing works. But again, maybe would you like to share any other extra details on that end?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the quickest way to get to me, my email address, Noah P. Healy, NoahPhealy @yahoo.com. You can also reach out and connect me on LinkedIn, Noah Healy there. And yes, as you mentioned, there is a website, CoordDisc, COORDISC, Coordinated Discovery, just the first parts of both those words. And there's a white paper for download. If you contact me directly, I'll just send you a copy if you want it. There's some video that explains what's going on. Please do reach out and educate yourself. No, and
we are less than 1 minute, so I got a few seconds, but I really want to extend my thanks to you. Noah, thank you for sharing your time. And actually, I do believe that the system, especially in the world that we're going into moving forward, it'll definitely it'll need to be adopted. And so I'm hoping that it gets running, and I'll definitely share it with my followers. And I'm definitely sure there'll be a lot of people who are interested in participating in it. So thank you so much again for hopping onto the show.
Thank you. And I will mention that there is a guy in South Africa trying to set up an index using the technology. And so maybe you'll be at the forefront of this revolution.
No, please do share his contact. But I think we're going to cut out just now. But again, thanks so much, and hopefully we'll have you on again.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take it easy.